Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled HOA forced ex-marine to sell his house due to his 13-foot flagpole. He gets epic revenge. My neighbor was a marine in his youth, and anybody living near him can tell that he is very proud of that fact. He is a really nice guy too, and I sometimes find myself chatting with him as we both walk our dogs and sometimes cross paths. In the front of his house is a 13-foot tall flagpole that I never really paid much mind to. I don't know how others personally felt about it, but it was just something there, and despite the height it was not that noticeable since you saw it every day. The issue really came when our HOA decided that they needed to get involved and have things be their way. The HOA was not very nice in our neighborhood, and at least personally, I've been bothered by very minor things once or twice myself. Most of the stories I got and interactions between my neighbor and the HOA were either told to me by the neighbor or overheard when they would come to his house and try to fight him about it. From what I gathered though, the issue was that his pole was both too tall and was supposed to be attached to the house and not in the yard. Now, it might seem like a simple request to move it against a house, but not in the way his house is. Tall bushes are close to the property, and if he tried to hook the flag up to his home, it would be covered up and even potentially destroyed by the branches. Still, the HOA seemed adamant about him getting rid of the flag and took the entire situation further than I have seen them take anything before. Of course, my neighbor was not the kind of guy to just be pushed around, so the fines and requests that he got went ignored until the HOA came to his house one day and told him that they were going to sue him and make him sell his house. I could not believe how nasty these people were and did my best to be there for my neighbor, who was stressed and just wanted to be left alone. He explained that he was part of a long lineage of families in the Marines, and having a flagpole was something so ingrained into his life. It was not hurting anybody, and he just wanted to show that he was a patriot in the best way that he knew how. Still though, the HOA made good on their threats and took him to court, wanting his property to be foreclosed on due to the violation and his refusal to amend it. Since on paper he was technically breaking the rules, the initial judge ruled in favor of the HOA and for him to have to sell his house and move. Don't worry, the story does not end with them winning. This is where it actually starts to turn in the favor of the neighbor. While the HOA and minor court were against him, the whole situation caused a bit of a stir in the area. Soon, the state legislation got wind of the entire thing happening, and some people in it were not happy about what the HOA was doing to this veteran. Even a lawyer offered his services to my neighbor for free and claimed that the state laws about freedom to fly a flag outweighed the rules of the HOA. My neighbor was so glad that he might not have to sell his house after all, and agreed with the lawyer to keep the fight going and not let the HOA bully their way into beating him. He appealed the decision, and next he got to present his reasonings to the court. Some keen readers might realize that I never mentioned the problem of the flag height, and this was because I was saving it for this part. There was actually no rule of height limits, so all of the fines they gave him that combined the two things were considered void, and that was how he got out of all of those fines. They were for location and height of the flag, so his lawyer got them thrown out because of it. Now it was time for the whole decision on if the HOA were going to get him to sell his house or if his lawyer was going to stop it. It was found that an interpretation of state law regarding flags overruled the bylaws of the HOA. Neighbor also countersued the HOA for harassment and the fees that he accrued when he thought he needed to go find somewhere else to live. Neighbor was not going to just stop things there and decided that he needed to get some revenge on the HOA and teach them that just because they have money and a lawyer does not mean they can bully people. So, besides getting money from them, he decided that his flagpole deserved a well-earned upgrade. Keep in mind though that this kind of process takes months, and in the meantime, my neighbor was still having to make the preparations in case he did have to move. The entire time the HOA was bothering him and sending him more letters in the mail. talking about how they were setting up showings for the house and he was just going to have to deal with it because they were so sure they would win. So, while I do like that he won at the end of it, I was happier it was just over and my neighbor could relax and de-stress. He was not the youngest guy after all, and everyone else was trying to help him out where we could. If the HOA members did not like his 13-foot flagpole, then they probably were furious when they saw the now new 20-foot flagpole in his yard. Neighbor could not have been proud of it though and called it poetic revenge. Still, the entire lawsuit got the attention of everyone around us and he was going to use that to his advantage. He would explain to people that they could even get a smaller pole for a decent price and display their flags on it much more visibly than on their house. This is a very patriotic and military family area, so he had a lot of takers in listening to him. Soon you could not walk your dog without seeing flagpoles everywhere, and deep down knowing the HOA hated it just made it that much better. Of course, nobody ever tried to compete with his flagpole, as it stayed the tallest one of the neighborhoods by far. On national holidays, people would often visit him because he lived alone and they wanted to celebrate with him. Especially on the 4th of July, he would entertain people on his property and they would all hang out right under his flag. The HOA is still around and still trying to find people for minor stupid things. I doubt they will try to do anything crazy like trying to get a house foreclosed again though. I didn't know much about Marines or even ex-Marines before this whole debacle started, but I am glad I learned the amount I did. The biggest takeaway for me though was that if you try and mess with one of them, you are going to have a lot of very angry people on their side ready to take you down. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I really hope that the HOA in this story learned their lesson and will stop bothering people, and especially ex-military people, with all this petty BS. I think these people especially went through a lot in their life and they shouldn't have to deal with all this HOA BS when they are old. Either way, if you still enjoy the HOA stories, I would really appreciate if you could also post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance, your support is very much appreciated. The next one is titled, You Should Have Paid Me. My stepdad works as a landscaper and does snow in the winter. He had many clients in one townhouse community. One time he had this lady who was a regular client at first, always paid on time, always polite, etc. However, over time, the lady started to get slow with her payments and was not home when he was there. Eventually, she fell behind, and when my stepdad went to collect, she had the audacity to say, "I have never seen you in my life," in a stern voice, not acting like someone with dementia or someone who genuinely did not recognize the person. Afterwards, he asked his other clients in the neighborhood about her, and they all said she was insane. Cue the revenge. My stepdad makes it a point to recruit both of her neighbors as new clients. My stepdad comes back with his friend after a 1.5-foot snowstorm. There are two driveways to the left and right of hers with the way the townhouses are set up. He instructs his friend to blow every inch of snow from both driveways directly onto hers, and they get to work. They purposely did this when she was home and she came out livid. His friend pretended to not speak English and my stepdad said, probably with the biggest grin on his face, "I'm sorry, I've never seen you in my life," and then left. Edit, this lady was around her mid-30s and definitely did not have dementia. She also called his phone and left an angry message after he did, so she did recognize him. I understand this might not have been the most legal and ethical way to deal with it, but revenge is revenge. The next one is titled, Steal from a Store, I Will Embarrass You. A couple months ago, I walked into a convenience store followed by 4 10 to 12-year-olds right behind me. Immediately, I could tell they were up to something. One of the kids very loudly said, "Okay, so I'm just going to look around a bit while I wait for my mom." It was like he was announcing it for the benefit of the cashier. They were all trying way too hard to act normally when it really just made them stand out that much more. They broke off separately and walked down different aisles. Then, plain as day, I see them open up their backpacks and not so sneakily slip items into their bags. I quietly told the cashier that the kids were stealing. I kept quiet and waited until they dug their holes a little deeper. 2 of the kids walked up to check out, each with only one small item. The other 2 hung back a little further. Oh, thieving adolescents, you are not so sly. I suppose I could have just told the cashier and left it at that, but where's the fun in that? I couldn't just pass up an opportunity to publicly shame a group of preteens, could I? Nope. So I called them out and asked if they had forgotten about the items they had stuffed into their backpacks. Deer in headlights, all of them, the responses of, "What? Huh? I put the other stuff back." Me? See, we all know that's not true now, is it? It took roughly 1 minute for these kids to fold. Once they accepted defeat and realized they'd been caught, I walked with them and helped them put back all of their stolen items, all the while pooping their pants. One kid bolted out of the store as soon as I called them out, one kid began crying and the other 2 just begged to not be in trouble and not to call the police or their parents. At that point, the cashier took over and made it very clear they were never allowed back into the store. Sorry, not sorry kids, don't steal. Edit for clarity, the items were things like chips, 5-hour energy and candy. They all appeared to be well taken care of as they had nice clothes, shoes, backpacks, hats and sunglasses. Several people brought up whether or not this would actually be considered revenge. The boys did not steal from me personally, that's true. I do live in the community and I witnessed a business being ripped off. That is someone's livelihood. Shouldn't we have our neighbors' backs? I don't think revenge is concretely specific to oneself and can be had on another's behalf. And yes, I intentionally brought attention to what they were doing. The goal was to scare or embarrass them and hopefully deter them from doing it again. I would really hope someone would do the exact same thing to my son if he was pulling some crap like this. And you know, Ripe Star, speaking of stealing and stuff, for some reason I just remembered when I was really young, maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, my family knew this person who was actually very well known in the neighborhood, a woman with 2 kids, and she was very well known for one thing and one thing only. She frequently went into supermarkets or even electronic stores and she liked to change the labels on the items she was trying to buy. So basically, if there was something like a game console that cost like maybe $300-400 or something, she would instead swap the label with, let's say, a video game or whatever that cost like $50, and then she really had the audacity to go to the cashier and try her luck. And seriously, sometimes she really got lucky and got the item really cheap. Obviously, I think something like this is not possible today anymore, but I remember even as a little kid I was sort of baffled at how little attention the cashier was paying in these situations. And the next one is a neighbor story from r/askreddit, and it starts like this. Our neighbors across the street from us in the place we were renting were part of some sort of gang and would sell drugs out of their house. Multiple times we saw the little girl and boy walk out to a car that just pulled up, hand them something and then go back inside. They were the second house from the neighborhood entrance and they would still peel out of their driveway and go 30 miles per hour the 150 feet to the stop sign and then do a burnout as they drove out of the neighborhood. The best part was that they bought the old Crown Vics at the police auction and pimped them out with horrendous rims and loud awful stereo systems that rattled the whole frame of the car. You could hear them coming from 2 miles down the road. They played their music so loud at all hours of the night that we called the cops almost every weekend and it never even fazed them. It was so loud that it would rattle our windows and I was actually able to Shazam a song from sitting on my couch. We actually got them on our Ring camera saying, "Only the snitch people across the street call the cops." After the cops left, the one time we did not call them. They got raided by the police one Friday night and literally by that Sunday they were having a gang initiation block party with probably 50 cars lining the whole street. My husband heard gunshots one day while I was at work and it turns out that the mom's ex-boyfriend tried to bust down the door, so she tried to shoot him and evidently missed. We survived renting that house for 6 months before we broke our lease because of them. The next one is another AskReddit story and it starts like this. The property next door had an exotic animal farm that failed due to their incompetent management. Soon after they sold off their animals and retired, they began laying complaints against our livestock dogs who they spent hours teasing through the fence for noise complaints, aka barking, on a livestock property. On top of that, they began nitpicking exact council ordinances marshalling their local harassment network of neighbors, which comprised of the 3 properties either side of ours. They tried canvassing the others, and when they refused to join in their BS, these lunatics started laying council complaints on them too. This went on for 8 years, to the point where I got to know the local council guy who would come out and placate the neighbors and chat to me, basically just running through the motions of the complaint because he had to. Eventually, the neighbor who initiated the problem, her husband died. On her own, she would still lay complaints, but her networking was gone because she was insufferable on her own and no one seemed to like her. She was instigating the issues and sending her husband out to recruit his friends previously. As she continued this war and the neighbors on the other side maintained their support, we got sick of playing nice. We started noting the various obvious violations of the council ordinance on their properties and started being just as litigious. Reported their bees to the apiary society, unregistered hives, their paddocks were full of weeds and long fire hazard grass that was reported to our contact at the council. We started using trail cams to capture footage of pest animals running from their dens in the neighbor's property and reporting that too. Funnily enough, in a few short months the harassment ended and the problem neighbor moved out. The other neighbors now live in an uncomfortable truce where we don't acknowledge each other, where previously we were relatively amicable. And the next one is also from r/askreddit and it starts like this. For context, I am 20 years old living with my parents and my neighbors in his 50s. Alright, so this happened to me about 2 months ago. My neighbor and I have a private road that is in between our houses. My house is technically on a main road, but I can use the private road to park my car on my lawn if I ever need to. My neighbor, on the other hand, needs to use the private road to pull into his driveway, so anyways, I got a new car. It is a 2002 Ford Explorer, and since my driveway, the main road entrance, was full of cars, I parked it on my lawn by driving up the private road just for the day. I got out of my new car, new for me, and was checking it out and such. I was looking under it to admire its lack of rust when out of nowhere I hear, "What do you think, this is a mechanic shop?" Confused and startled, I stand up and say, "I'm confused. Is there a problem?" My neighbor walks onto the private road in front of the property line and says, "Well, I don't know. Is there? How long are you going to keep the car here?" I responded with, "As long as I want." He rebuttals with, "I have an open house tomorrow and I don't want your car there. You're using my driveway to park your car. I don't want it here." I explained that I'm not using his driveway, I am using the private road. You can legally drive on private roads regardless of whether or not you pay for them, and that my car's on my property, so he really has nothing on me. He demands that I move my car and I tell him that I'm not going to move it because it is on my property, so it is none of his business. Throughout the argument, his wife was yelling stuff at me from the house, and it basically ended with me cussing him and his wife out, and both of us walking away from each other and leaving my car parked there for a week instead of a day. Basically, the moral of the story is that if you want someone to do something that they don't need to do, ask them nicely and they will probably do it. Being an a-hole about it is not going to give you what you want. The next one is titled, "Loud Party Until 5 AM? Enjoy the pack howling." So, I got these super annoying neighbors across the road. I live in a rather quiet area, mostly elderly people, but the family across the street are this young couple with their 3 kids. They are all horrible, but that's another story. The neighbors likes parties as often as possible, gladly on weekdays too, and they always have their parties outside, and I have no idea what kind of surround system they got, but their music is hella loud and they always party until like 5 AM. It's warm in the summer and I like to sleep with my window open, but even when I am forced to close it, their music is still loud enough for me to hear from across the road. I have asked them several times if they could please not be so loud. I mean, if I can hear it so clearly from such a distance, it must be extremely loud where they are. They always promise to not be as loud next time, and yet the story always repeats itself. One night I was getting so fed up with it, as I had a very early and long shift the following day and I was getting no sleep. That is when I planned my revenge. I got 3 big dogs of the breed Alaskan Malamute. If you know the breed, you will know they don't bark a lot, but oh, do they love howling. Pretty much all of the people in the neighborhood got dogs except the idiots across the road. My dogs are usually outside all day since they prefer it like that, and they are just let in for food and to sleep for the night. My garden is huge and long, and the fence is lined up against the bicycle path and the path for walking where everyone walks past with their dogs. When my dogs hear another dog barking, one of them will often howl and the others join in. They only howl in the morning though, for some reason, so I keep my dogs in during the early morning hours so they won't bother other people. The elderly neighbors in the area hate the loud music and partying from the neighbors too, and even though we have talked to the police about the disturbance, they always shrug it off. I wrote a bunch of notes about my plan and put the notes in the mailbox of everyone in the neighborhood except the idiots across the street. Another party night came. I waited for the right moment to strike. I listened to the music and the guests. They slowly left and the music died down. The last guest left. They were closing down the party and went inside. Lights went out. Most likely they went to bed as it was 5 AM at the time, and bam! Who let the dogs out? I sure did. Out the three goes, happy and running around in the garden and playing until a person walks by with their dog. The little dog barks upon seeing my three dogs, and on cue, one of mine starts howling and the other two join in, making quite some noise. After a while, the idiots from across the road come storming out and decide to knock on my door and tell me to make my dogs shut up. I asked them in the sweetest tone if the noise bothered them. Could they not sleep? Did the noise keep them up? The guy of the couple angrily shouted yes and asked if I would take my dogs back inside. I just answered with, "Oh, of course, it won't happen again," and I let my dogs back inside. A few days later, another party night, and the plan repeated itself. As soon as the guests were gone and I knew they had gone to sleep, I let my dogs out and the howling began. Angry neighbor storms out and asks what is up with the howling, as I had promised to keep them inside. Oh, like you had promised not to be so loud with your music? If you're allowed to be so noisy with your music, I'm allowed to let my dogs be noisy. If you keep doing this, then I will too. Your choice. He was not happy and just asked me to make my dogs shut up. They repeated the party terror one more time, followed with the morning howling, and since then they have still the same amount of parties, but the music is much more quiet and the parties now end around midnight on weekdays. Needless to say, the rest of the neighborhood was quite glad I made a stop to the party terror. And ripe stars, even though this is a genius solution to the situation, if I would be OP, I would still be kind of concerned about my dogs because the neighbors seem kind of crazy, and I would be worried that they might do something to my dogs. How would you have handled that situation? Let us know in the comments if you have similar concerns. By the way, guys, I was just trying to record, but somebody is grooming herself down there. It's like really tickling. Right, Disney? Yeah, she really likes to stay down there. I'm not sure if I can ever clean that carpet again, but yeah, it's just a nice spot. And I guess it fits her because it's like really fluffy. So I guess that's what she likes, right? Yeah, it's really cute. If you're wondering how I usually record, so here 0.5. So I have my laptop here. Then sometimes I like open the curtains and sometimes I close them. And then sometimes a day I have my lights on and it's just like a nice little atmosphere to work, you know. And yeah, and sometimes Disney is helping me out. Or in this case more distracting me, but it's still cute. Right, Disney? So yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.